You've famously been the candidate who announced that he would like to see the budget open. You're vice chair. You've never seen the budget of the Democratic Party, and you're in a leadership position. You're an executive in the party, and you've talked about this. And now everybody seems to be for opening up the budget. Would you be open to an audit of the Democratic Party and some of the other organizations like the DCCC, the Congressional Committee, and the Senate Committee, and maybe even the state parties?
Well, we don't have any real responsibility over the DTRIP or the DGA. Right. Those are separate entities. But the DNC alone, at least the officers should know what's being done. And so I called for a real change about how we actually do that. So I've been an officer, a vice chair representing the state parties for the last 8 years, the only officer that was actually elected. The others were appointed by the White House.
Interesting.
And so I had a different perspective for the last 8 years that was different from everyone else. And what I believe is that any employee that makes over $100,000 a year should go before the officers, and we should approve that hiring. Any contract that we're signing of over $100,000 should come to the officers, and we should get a monthly update on the budget and expenditures, and that the senior staff needs to come before us and actually tell us what programs they're working on. Are they being effective? I mean, do we have staff working on this or working on that? I think the whole hacking. Maybe if we had been more engaged and involved and known that we were doing it haphazardly and did not actually have a real company doing it, that would have saved us a lot of money that we're now spending to protect the employees and the systems within the DNC. I think that so while the idea of getting into the money situation in the other state parties and other committees is an intriguing thing down the road. At the very least we should do is really get ourselves together at the DNC.
Or calling for it. Something as a figurehead. The money situation has been something that I've been very interested in, and I've been really trying to follow as much as possible. Of course, it's hard when there's no open budget. But what shocks me is the Democratic Party has raised more money than ever. Of course, they had a sitting president. They raised more money for the presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton. Of course, in the past 8 years, they've raised more money. Yet they've lost more seats than the late 1920s, over 1,000 seats. The Democratic Party has never been a leader.
And that's why I've been frustrated by continually being asked, well, how are you going to raise the money to do all this investment in the grassroots and build the infrastructure that needs to be done? And I was like, we don't need to raise any more money. Right. It's about how we spend the money. And it is infuriating that what we're doing is making these consultants within DC multimillionaires, and the media, corporate media that owns all those television stations, ridiculously wealthy.
And they're giving money to the Democratic Party too, are they not? Like Time Warner was a big sponsor of the DNC, and you don't know.
I don't know.
Well, they bought out. They put out ads and they sponsored the DNC, so they actually have.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
So what is frustrating is that we saw that investing in the state parties worked in 06 and 08. I understand and I appreciate there were folks that were making decisions that had never really operated within a state party and didn't really understand that that was part of their success going into 08. But look at where we were in 08 compared to where we are today. And I absolutely believe that if we had continued that level or maybe even an increase in state parties, we're spending about $250,000 per year in every state party. I'm talking about in Wyoming, Florida, Maine, West Virginia, every single state got $250,000 roughly. And that was roughly about 5 field organizers. For most of the last 8 years, it was to between 60,000 and a little over 100,000, which simply was not enough to actually do the work. I think that what we've done in New Hampshire has proven that investing in the grassroots and respecting those who are volunteers on the local level actually makes a difference. We were able to actually track the turnout, the increase in the turnout in 2014 and 2016 completely falls along the lines of where we had for local organizations where people actually were going door to door talking to their neighbors. And it wasn't about out-of-state volunteers coming in doing it. It was about actual neighbors talking to neighbors. It increased. Turnout in 2014 was down about 3% from 2010, which was a bad year.
Right. We got a shellacking in 2010.
And New Hampshire was up almost 4%. It was like a 7% turnaround, but it wasn't in every single community. And when we looked at it, it was based on how many local people were talking to their neighbors. And I came back to the DNC in 2015 and said, I got the answer. We can do this. And because nobody makes any money off from hiring organizers, nobody makes any money off opening up local offices, nobody in Washington cared. And that's why I'm running against it. And I know that on paper, you look at it, I've obviously got the experience to be the chair, but I don't have the people beating down the doors trying to give me money like the other candidates.
2016, of course, we all know the Bernie Hillary thing, but it did inspire, it has inspired, whether it's by electing Donald Trump and having thousands, tens of thousands of women say that they want to run for office, or young people who felt disaffected and frustrated after the Bernie Sanders campaign. There's thousands of people now who are willing and ready to run for office. But we know it takes a lot of money to run for office for the most part. And it's not easy breaking through some of these local parties. Now, you're chair of a state party, a small state, has a very active membership. It's not like that in some of these other state parties. And
it's very frustrating.
How do you change that culture? How do you tell the chair of a party where maybe the chair's been there for 30 years and all the people who are running that party, hey, let that young person in and run for legislator? Or listen.
Well, I think that's an important kind of conversation, and that's sort of the dysfunction of the DNC, because have been perfectly willing to have that sort of conversation with chairs, but because a complaint will go to the DNC building and then it disappears, because the DNC building doesn't actually care about the grassroots. And so I never found out about it, so I could never make that hard call. But I was always willing to call a chair and say, hey, you've got to open up your doors. One of the things that when I go around to talk to different state parties, I said, I should not be the youngest person in this room. There's something wrong if I am the youngest person. And it's absolutely true. I should never attend a meeting other than for the senior council that I am the youngest person in any Democratic room. It's just not right. I become very agitated when I see that happening, because clearly what's happening, and I try explaining to people that our business is still winning elections, because when we win elections, we actually can move the ball forward and make a better society. And we all got involved because we want equality, we want justice, we want a progressive future. And if you're not electing somebody, if you're not even, okay, maybe you're in a state where you can't win a statewide race, but can you elect a local sheriff?
Right.
Can you elect a local county commissioner? Can you elect a local mayor? You can do something. Everyone can do something. Because even if you can't win a statewide, and maybe it's really bad what's going on at your state capital, but if you can make your little town a little better by having a progressive leading it, then you've done something to make the world a better place. And respecting those individuals and encouraging them. But we're not going to kind of build that sort of grassroots network without giving the sort of tools to the state parties to really open up and welcome people.
Do the state party chairs meet?
Well, we meet. We meet 4 times a year. We meet in conjunction with the DNC meetings, and then we have 2 other meetings in between where we do week-long trainings and discussions. And our meetings are completely different than the way the DNC meetings are. The way I run the ASTC is by consensus, and it's been very difficult over the years for the DNC staff and leadership to understand how I run the ASTC. That they say, well, we want you to do this. I was like, well, I'm sorry, but the membership voted to do that. And they're in charge, and they cannot process that I let the membership decide. And they think that somehow I just go and tell them what to do. And I was like, no, that's not leadership. to me. It's here are the options that we have. Let's all discuss it. What do we think has worked out best? And we move forward. And that's exactly how I would want to have it run the DNC. I want to be able to open it up, allow the executive committee to be much more involved, allow the membership of the DNC to be much more involved, make these meetings with trainings as well, and discussion groups, and really talk about what you're hearing on the grassroots. We're not sharing of any information. Because I've always been so frustrated because somebody might be in some other state, just fix something that I'm having a problem with, and I don't know about it because there's no communication going on. And that was the frustrating thing with the Black Caucus, as an example, or the Latino Caucus, or LGBT Caucus, or Asian Pacific Caucus. There are phenomenal leaders that are members of those caucuses that could be incredibly helpful to almost every state party has those caucuses as well, but there's no communication between the national caucus and the state party caucuses. And to be able to get some of those remarkable people to come to speak at our local caucuses and involve, when I go to a state party convention or dinner, I was asked to speak to the local LGBT group or Stonewall group. And I've had some fascinating conversations in a remote island in Alaska.
Right.
There were 30 people showed up to talk about LGBT issues. And for them, hearing from me, having had the 30 plus years experience working in the LGBT movement, for that, I was the first person they ever talked to that had really been through that entire process and could explain how it is. And so I think sharing of that stuff we don't talk to each other on the DNC. We don't talk to the voters. We don't talk to anybody. There's no conversations going on anymore, and that is not a successful way to run any organization.